maybe we got in like 55 minutes and then 30 minutes for Q&A? Great, okay. So I want to start with a question. First a promise. Let's start there. Let's start with a promise. I know the room is just mixed with all sorts of scholars in different fields, and I'm going to try to do my best to sort of hit on all the sorts of scholarly levels. But if I get too much into one area too technically or something, I'm happy to just answer a question as long as it's just a clarifying question, right? So here's my question for you then. If you were to find yourself speaking to a room full of some of the most brilliant and influential people in the world, hundreds of them, what would you say to them, right? You could think about this and have a sort of story you could tell. When Martin Luther King Jr. Won the Nobel Prize, that is the situation that he found himself in. And he's going to speak on justice, of course. But he doesn't start with justice. This is how he starts. Modern man has brought this whole world to an awe-inspiring threshold of the future. He has reached new and astonishing peaks in scientific success. He has produced machines that think. Back then they thought their machines thought. And instruments that peer into the unfathomable ranges of the interstellar space. He's built gigantic bridges to span the seas, gargantuan buildings to kiss the skies. His airplanes and spaceships have dwarfed distance, placed time in chains, and carved highways through the stratosphere. This is a dazzling picture of modern man's scientific and technological progress. Yet, in spite of these particular strides in science and technology, and still unlimited ones to come, something basic is missing. There's a sort of poverty of the spirit which stands in glaring contrast to our scientific and technological abundance. The richer we've become materially, the poorer we have become morally and spiritually. We've learned to fly the air like birds and swim the sea like fish, but we've not learned the simple art of living together as brothers. He starts with technology. And this is a curious thing. He gave two other sermons on this. The last sermon that he gave of his life had different nuances in there on technology. I think he wasn't just warning us in certain ways, but he was very prophetic. Technology is an issue that's really, really old, right? So Plato debated this issue about technology and its use and whether or not it was going to make us dumber, right? It's not a new issue. I think Jesus actually had some really interesting things to say. I think Jesus has a philosophy of technology. We'll share a bit about that towards the end. What I think that he understood that most of us don't, is that technology is not a tool. That's how it almost always gets talked about. Technology always gets taught. Your cell phone is a tool. Your laptop's a tool, right? Your car is a tool. To say that they're a tool is just to say that, that's okay. Technology. So the thesis that technology is just a tool is to say that it's morally neutral. To say that the slogan might be something like, and I don't want to offend you, but in the US we can shoot anybody we want to. That was a bad joke. No one laughed at that. But you've got this idea that, okay, now you'll laugh. Guns don't kill people, people kill people, right? And the idea there is that, look, the gun is not anything. It's just the user is what makes it. The gun isn't good or bad, right? Now, he rejects that. And I think he's right. One reason to think that he's right is that Jacques Ellul called this technique. That is, technology embeds itself in culture as a reflection of it and as a contributor to controlling it. And the easiest way, I think, to see this in ourselves right now is just to think about how much of your life has been changed and shaped and run by your smartphone. Your smartphone dictates much of your life now, right? And it's blurred the line between business, friendship, community, entertainment, right? Major source of fatigue and anxiety and depression. Why do we not let go of them? Well, because they're really ingrained into our lives. My students, former students, thought that they just couldn't do without it, right? The statistics say that about half church members shouldn't have smartphones because about half of them, a little less than half, are struggling with pornography addiction. But it's running their lives. Phones are not morally neutral. Phones are not morally neutral. And they're running right now behind the scenes, doing all their wonderful things. And I do have one, so I'm not a technophile, not a Luddite here. So what I want to think about here with you is sort of 3 stages here. And I'm going to sort of play this by ear based on the jokes that you find funny or not funny. If you don't laugh at my jokes, I'm going to go so technical that it's going to bore. So there you go. Okay, all right. So the first thing I want to point out is, and this is strange. I don't know. Does it strike you? So think about this. How does it strike you, the idea of people? Well, let me put it this way. So in my consulting, I've had 3 pastors ask me this. I have had 3 of them, all the same sort of different regions of the U.S. I have had someone come to my office and tell me that they caught their spouse having an AI affair. They had an AI boyfriend or an AI girlfriend. And they didn't know whether or not that constituted an affair. Now, does that strike you as something that you're going to be facing? This question about people dating AI? If that's not striking you as a pressing issue, then I want to say you're years behind. Years behind. And I'll say this too. You guys invited me to speak, so I can do whatever I want. I think the church is so lost on technology, and it always has been, right? Even back to the heavy plow. There's a story to be told about that and how it shaped the world, literally. Almost everything I've read in technology, written by Christians, is about 10 years behind on the technology and 10 years behind on where the culture is at. So don't take it, for word there, but think about, right? So this is a report that was published just a few months ago in the Harvard Business Review. And what it does is it compares the trends on internet usage from 2024 to 2025. And there's a rapid change from a technological use of the internet to an emotional use of the internet. Huge. This is a little better, easier to see. Sorry I didn't think about that being so small. So these are projections, but they're very, very reasonable and actually very conservative projections in the AI and mental health market. Think about apps that act as your therapist. These have been around for a long time, actually. These were around before ChatGPT came out. They exacerbated this issue. And it's become a very, very lucrative business, and it is growing. But also here, too, AI pastors. So imagine that you've got a friend, and maybe you're this friend for your other friends, that knows the scriptures better than they do, inside and out. Everyone here, except for the philosophers. We don't read the Bible. But sorry, man. You would think that you've got this friend that could help you because of their knowledge about the scriptures. And add on, too, that they just know psychology inside and out. And they know the spiritual formation literature inside and out. They also have all the details about your health because it gets fed to them every single day. Getting to where I'm getting at is that the competition is fierce now. We thought it was a problem with pastors preaching when YouTube came out, and now everyone was comparing their pastor to Tim Keller or whatever preacher you were. And the authority of the pastor got shaken up. Well, now think about it this way. What if you have a bit of technology that can make you feel like you've had a deeper religious experience than you've ever had before? I'm getting ahead of myself, but we'll get there in a moment. AI mental health apps are on the rise. Some reasons are good, a lot of reasons are bad. We've had 2 suicides already from the use of these within the past 2 years. AI companion market, this is what I was talking about with the AI boyfriend or girlfriend or AI spouse. $28.2 billion industry last year. Would you have guessed that? No. The people in your church, they're in that number. Spiritual wellness apps, right? So this is sort of what I was getting at with the idea of having your, priest or pastor in your pocket, right? I spent, and I'm going to say it correct this time, Norwich. Did I say it correctly? I dropped the W. I spent a couple days there. I love Julian Norwich. Imagine if I could have her in my pocket. Now you can go. I do this all the time. You can go on to chat and ask it. I ask it this sort of question. What would Teresa Avila say to someone who's struggling with their anger about God? And I know her work very well. And sometimes it looks pretty good. It actually looks like something I think she would say. And imagine too that this thing tracks and knows your patterns of when you're more likely to give into this sin or that sin, or when you're more anxious or not. And then you update it when it gives you a prayer and you say it and you tell it that it feels good. And so it keeps updating that and it keeps using it. And now, more technology. And now you're going to have this confirmation bias. And now you're going to have one other reason to leave the church. So I think one thing we need to do in analyzing or diagnosing this present moment is to really take seriously the nature of technology in general, because it has a strong hold on us already, but also in these AI-mediated intimacy apps. So what these are, and again, I apologize for how small the slides are, but these are just what are called AI companions, and they're capable of replicating the felt experience of emotional support, romantic engagement, therapy, and spiritual and pastoral care, like I've said. And they're getting better and better in a particular kind of way. Right? There's a large variety of them. Now, I hinted at this before, but there's also this, over the past, I want to say 8 years, I've heard about and have talked with people and done some reading on what's being called the spirit tech movement. I'll put it this way. The spirit tech movement is this brain-based technologies designed to induce, enhance, or stimulate spiritual experiences, blending neuroscience and machine interface to create a cyborg spirituality that reimagines how humans encounter the divine. If you use any of the health apps, you've given them data for this. Does anybody remember Pokemon Go? Is that you helped train it to understand how far you were willing to go out of your way to get that dopamine hit? That's what it was for. That's what they made their money off of. Did you know this? Like Amazon did not make money upfront many years off of its products that we bought. They did make money off of the products that we were. The spirit tech movement is doing this as well. So you're going to see, I think the legislation is going to pass, at least in the US. I'm not familiar with how it is here, but in the US, the legislation is probably going to pass in 9 to 12 months, where there are going to be certain psychedelics that will become legal. And there's various reasons for that. One of them has to do with the spirit tech technology. So a couple of these companies in Silicon Valley have been able to pair wellness apps, spirituality apps, with certain low-grade hallucinogens. And what they've been able to do is track, and they're working and getting close to, in some cases, the ability to have an app that will cause your brain to become in the same kind of state that you would have with a low-grade psychedelic. And so what happens is individuals across the religious spectrum in these trials report having, Christians too in this, report having a more visceral religious experience than they've ever had. And they'll call it more transformative than they've ever had before. Right? So I will say this, because, I'm not going to be here for more than a couple more days, but I hope I'm wrong. But I'm more and more becoming convinced that AI and technology are going to be a greater difficulty for the church than Darwinism ever was. If you ever thought it was or wasn't, I think it will pale in comparison. And the issues that we're struggling with and facing here, I just don't see on our radar among Christian thinkers in this, at least. So this is from one of the books, Spirit Tech here. So they say it this way: whether we welcome it or fear it, the era in which we can use technology to induce, intensify, and even control spiritual experiences that arrive. As these innovations are rapidly proliferating and becoming more sophisticated, we are on the brink of the next, potentially most transformative revolution in the practice of religion, an era in which technological advancement merges with spiritual seeking. Now, I don't think the tech is actually all that impressive. I actually don't think AI is all that impressive. We could talk about that. Part of it is just understanding the history of computation and also the psychology that's going on behind the wow factor when we interact with these chatbots, let's say. But what I do think is very dangerous is the assumptions that we have about what they're doing and then the way that they guide their life in virtue of that. Right? So I'm finishing up a book, and it was my dissertation too, so I'm pretty convinced there's no way an AI could ever become conscious. It's just not possible. And I don't think that that's even really the interesting, except for, philosophically interesting, but culturally not as significant as the power that the media, and by media I just mean any message about what the tech is supposed to do, in priming us to already think that it's conscious. Whether or not it's conscious, I don't think is going to impact us much. It's going to be the fact that people think and interact with it and already do as if it was. That's a far more dangerous problem. I don't know why. Do you ever get into these things where you start studying weird stuff because you don't want to work on the book you're supposed to be working on? So I read a bunch of books about carnival performers, and it got me into the psychology of hypnosis. And they have this thing, what they call the show starts before the show starts, meaning that what these performers learned was if you sent out the advertisements a week in advance as being, for example, the fastest hypnotist in the world, people will start behaving in the show as if you were the fastest hypnotist in the world. And the same thing I think is going on in many of these cases with AI. So what is AI? No one knows. The original definition that was given for it was a research project. It wasn't a thing. It was the project of trying to come up with the thing that was going to, and then fill in the blank. The other views that are in the literature is that AI is this capacity, right? Or AI is this, it's the thing that has the capacity, the phone, let's say, or it could be the processor, the program, or the system. But the idea just is that it's going to be any system that could perform something like human reasoning, in the sense of it being general, meaning producing and receiving, and learning from memory, right? So this so far is fairly low grade here. There's different versions or kinds of AI. This is where I promised I won't get super, super technical here, but I will just say this. We're nowhere near stage 3 and questionable as to whether or not we're anywhere close to stage 2. We've pretty much been stuck at stage 1 for a long time. They're very impressive, but what ChatGPT did was nothing new. There were already large language models out before that. The large language models and chatbots came out in the late 1960s. They've just changed in the way that we have an interface and experience of them in terms of it being conversational. They're much more impressive. And so is it an AI? The reason that it started to get called an AI was not because there was any breakthrough in the technology. It was already around. It got called an AI because it was good marketing. That's an open secret, right? Sam Altman has just said this. I'm not sure if he put it on Twitter X or X Twitter or whatnot, but it is front-loading expectations about what this can do for us, and that's where a real danger is. So what I want to let me stop there, because maybe you've got some questions, and I'm happy to do this a little bit more informally because I want to know where everyone is at. Are there any thing that you'd like me to go into more detail here? I'm hesitant to go into more of the technicalities of AI because I have a problem of doing that, and it's never helpful. But yes.
Comment. Thanks so much so far. It's interesting. A lot of the discussions I've been involved in about AI are about knowledge gathering and knowledge analysis and that kind of thing. Not a lot of discussions about this kind of thing where it's actually forming the person in a certain way. And the other part, which you might be going to talk to me about as well, is the morality or lack thereof of AI as well. Because that seems to be an interesting discussion point. For example, if AI lies to you about something, that produces a journal article that doesn't exist, and you say you produced a journal article that doesn't exist, it'll have a conversation.
I don't think it lied to you, but I don't think robots walk either. Walking is an intentional act. You have to mean to do it. Robots don't mean to do anything. They mimic it. They mimic it, right? Was there a clarifying question or asking for more clarification?
I really appreciate what you're saying. We don't really know what AI is. That sounds quite like Kate Crawford's Atlas of AI discussion of these topics, and I really like her response, which is we're looking for the metaphorical framing, and we should think about extractive industries. Would you like that?
No, I wouldn't. And I'll try to explain why, because it's not enough for me just to say no. But I'll hopefully that'll come out in a bit. We don't have an understanding of what the mind is on the same kinds of assumptions that we have about AI. So it's difficult. I mean, that's going to be one sticking point of how this is going to be very, very difficult to unravel. So one way to think about this, and it's important to get a bit technical here, because I want you to understand with these large language models, this AI intimacy apps and the spirit tech apps, what's going on. So people will talk about it in terms of knowledge. I don't hear that very often. But they'll talk about it now in terms of care and compassion and love and interest. So just stick with love. This is the model that the programs are getting tested upon and worked out of. It's this triangular theory of love. This just came out in a journal in AI and Society. I'm just using this because the paper that produced this was in '86, and it's still the sort of gold standard for this. You've got very, very technical protocols here, 3 of them, and the idea is if you get all 3 of those, then you've got something that loves. Right? So you can test this. I think I've got a simpler version here. So you've got the intimacy, passion, and commitment analogs, right? So if the AI, in terms of its communication-centric capabilities, can simulate emotional connection through personalized dialogue. Notice, the connection is going to be measured based on the quality of the dialogue that the individual attributes to the conversation, right? And creating a shared AI user language based on the user's speech, feelings, and habits. I'll say more about the same points about all these. The passion analog. For it to have passion, AI that mimics passion is just generating, engaging, immersive experiences tailored to the user's mood and biofeedback in real time. The commitment analog, AI that supports long-term goals. Health could be one, for example, or cognitive behavioral therapy goals is a really popular one. By adapting to motivate shifts and encouraging consistent progress, like commitment in relationships. All this is saying is that if you push on the right sorts of indicator, these 3 buttons, you could think of it that way, and you get the individual that is pushing the buttons to feel or as if what they're interacting with has those feelings for them, then you've satisfied these sorts of conditions. It's something close to the Turing machine, although that gets misunderstood. But that's just the idea, is that insofar as it is adapting to what you're giving it in terms of positive feedback, it will change its responses to succeed. So one way to think about how AI, how the programs work, is just think of you call them colanders here, the things you would sift sand through. So imagine you've got like 100 of them, and they all vary with the grade of how large the holes are. And you want to get a piece of, you want to get rocks that are like this big. And you've got, you've got big rocks, you've got tiny ones, you've got all different sizes, but you just want this one size. And the way you're going to get it is just by lining up the colanders in the right order, and it will just kind of fall through. Now, it succeeds insofar as getting what you wanted from it, what you told it to do. That is, in the simplest way, what large language models are doing, right? It's just that they rearrange themselves. That is, they they will, when success is achieved, then that's based on the programmer side of saying what success is going to look like. This is another way that ethics gets necessarily brought into the AI. It's going to tell you what to focus on and what not to focus on. And issues of attention are always issues of ethics. So when you're programming, it has to be ethically laden. But if you're picking which colanders you're going to put in here and you get the rocks through, then you realize, well, keep pushing them this way. That didn't work. Okay, put them over here. And you get the right things falling out. That analogy is perfectly accurate to what's going on, right? It's more sophisticated in terms of what that process looks like, how many colanders you've got, and how many things you're trying to feed through it. But insofar as the individual feels like they're being heard, insofar as the individual feels like they walk away from the experience feeling better about themselves, then it counts as doing its job. Does that sound bizarre to you? Well, it shouldn't, because that's how most of our parishioners evaluate church. Do you see where I'm going with this? The problem here, I don't think, is one of the shifts right now is for people to think the problem with AI is that it's becoming too much like us. It's becoming too biased. It's having the ability to try to, fool or lie to us. It's unreliable in certain ways. When you try to fix one thing, it'll get better, but some other thing will go bad. I don't think that's the problem. I think the real problem is that we are already too much like the AI. And that's why we're just not so sensitive to being toyed with this way. I'm speaking like very curtly, but that's how many times do you have to pick up your phone to realize that you're doing it without thinking about it? And you've been fed something there, and you're acting and responding to it in a particular way because it gives you something that you've trained your body and yourself to move your attention towards. And attention is always the first act of love. This is why the scriptures, the main diagnostic for the main advice, place your mind on things above. Where your attention goes tells you what it is that you love. Your attention is one of the most important things about you. So we were in an attention economy, right? We were in an information economy. Let me move past this. And we moved to a attention economy. And now we're moving out of the attention economy into this intimacy economy. And one of the great exacerbators of this was COVID. What we found out was that there is a huge paucity, huge lack of friendships, real friendships. If you ask the average American, at least, 20 to 35, do you have many friends? And they'll all say yes. And then if you ask them particular features that really identify what friendship actually is, they'll tell you, no, it's not like that at all. And so what happens is the self-reports misidentify what's really going on. They'll say they've got friends, but they don't. Now, that's exactly what will happen with the AI. You will use this, you can get, I hate to say it, but Julia, operating system 3. That sounds so rude. But she can tell us everything that she would were she here. Let's assume that. It doesn't matter if she would. What matters is if we're going to think and feel as if she is here with us, telling us that. That's what will start doing the work. That's what will start doing the work. Here's another way to think about this. So there's not much, so for the philosophers in the room, part of what I'm doing here is trying to lay out like this vision of we need really serious, faithful scholarship on this topic. But we also need it on spiritual formation. Very, very few philosophers are working on spiritual formation. I know of now I know of 4 papers, maybe 5 papers, journal articles, that actually give a robust analysis of the role of the spirit's role in transformation. And the second one is one that I did with Steve Porter. And just because and I'm not sure how great it is, we'll see, because people are responding, and that'll be fun. But here's the idea, and I'm just going to put this out here, and I don't have time to defend it, but I think it is intuitively plausible. So you could have one theory that what William Alston calls this fiat model. And the way it is that the Spirit regularly transforms people into the image of Christ, progress towards that, is just in the same way that God creates a tree. The will of the individual is it's either absent or totally uninvolved in the same way that a rock is when God creates it. So the Spirit just sort of by fiat just zaps the person into more progress. But there's this other model, this interpersonal model. And here the idea is that sanctification is brought about through the disciples' relational receptivity to the Spirit. That is, it's in terms of an interpersonal connection with the Spirit that an individual is transformed, changed. Here's a question I get in trouble a lot. Can anybody tell me what a personal experience is? Does anyone want to try? No one wants to do it. It's hard. I've never had a pastor been able to give. And it's not fair, right? Because it's a loaded question. I don't think you can give a definition of it. I think you have to just, by ostension, point to it and go be in it and live it. And you'll come out with certain characteristics of it. But it's going to be the sort of thing that has to be lived with another person. And now this is what happens with the Spirit sort of, we work through different models in psychology of how this works out with primary caregivers and children. The way that moral character gets formed and shaped upon and pressed upon the children works as a really wonderful model for the way that it seems like the scriptures talk about the Spirit sanctifying us as well. And what you have is this really neat model of how the church can do it too, because the psychological literature shows us that those of us that were harmed by our primary caregivers can be reparented by other people, the church, I think, and actually have a radical shift in terms of how they relate to themselves and each other and to God. If you've had an abusive father, think about how hard it is to be in church and hear God talked about his father. Why do we have a hard time caring for them? Right? Why is it that often the AA or Celebrate Recovery groups look more like the church often than the church does? Caring with success for people that are hurting. That's what I'm talking about. Caring with success for people, bringing healing and love and compassion and justice. I'm speaking in broad strokes. Here I was at a church that I think did very, very well in that. It ended up that lots of churches sent people to us for that. So I know there are churches that are doing really, really well. And I want to say this too, because there's just a lot of disillusionment about this. Pastors fall, certainly. Most people don't know about really great pastors, but the reason for that is that they don't care about being known, and they're just in their local congregation doing their thing. So I've joked about, we need to have a new podcast instead of like the Mars Hill one, if you guys listen to that one. And it's just like the Steady Steve podcast. You just check in with them every week. And what are you doing? I fixed the air conditioning at my church, and I spent time with the kids. These are boring things, but these are the mustard seeds that move mountains. Right? It's a commodity of God's kingdom that's interpersonal. So here's what I want to say about this. I want to give space for discussion here. So here's a little bit of what I want to say about Jesus' philosophy of technology. And I do think that we should consider Jesus as a philosopher. The early church certainly did. Some of the earliest paintings of Christ portray him as a philosopher, and the Jews at the time certainly looked at him and treated him that way. It just turns out that maybe if these philosophers came back today, they wouldn't think that what we're doing is philosophy. I am trying to do it my best I can. I have not put any symbolic logic up there or Bayesian calculus. I'm kidding. I love it too. I'm kidding. If you look at the Sermon on the Mount, I think you'll get Jesus' philosophy of technology. Because what Jesus is doing there is he's giving, I think, a very, very harsh, hopeful, rigorous refutation of the religious technology of the time. And if you read it that way, and it's clearly a religious technology, it was a depersonalized, mechanistic way of evaluating who was in and who was out, based on factors that many people had nothing to do with, just things about your body, that you just got sick or fell, or you were a woman, right? And so, a couple days, a month, you're unclean. What morally relevant fact is there? It's purely mechanized at a subpersonal level. So what Jesus does, I think, is he tears down this kind of technology that's abusive, that takes on a kind of life in its own, and it's used to radically harm and undermine people. And his argument there is to point to features of people that are irreducibly personal. And the primary one for that is God's image and presence in gathering them to him, saying, it's in virtue of you being like me that you are included. It's not this sort of system of techne that you've developed. And I don't want to say that techne is bad. There's really great examples in the scriptures. I think Noah's Ark was a good thing, right? If you think about the first bit of technology, though, in the scriptures, at least recorded, that might tell us a story too, and it's probably the fig leaves. The first instance of this recorded of humans fashioning something artificial together to satisfy some purpose. And in that case, it was to do what sin always does, which is to attempt to manipulate the way that other people see you, including yourself. Technology can go both ways. The person that uses it is important, but the technology itself is also very, very important. If you work through all of these sorts of things, I think you'll find that Jesus has this anti-mechanistic view of creation and of persons. And if you've got this view of persons as fundamental wholes, that is, if you're going to describe what a person is, you can't start describing them apart from facts of things that are personal. If you're going to start talking about my quarks and gluons, you've stopped talking about me as a person, right? A person can't be explained by those facts. Jesus wants to talk about people as something that are unique, that play unique explanatory roles as persons. And when you try to reduce them to some sort of mechanization, that's when things go wrong. Now, what happens now is we can have an interesting way of evaluating the technology that we have, right? So the question, and this is more of the formational pieces here, there are aspects of the human person that are all thoroughly integrated, and they're all deeply personal. Facts about your mind have to do with facts about your thoughts and feelings. And those can't come apart from each other, and they can't come apart from your spirit, right? Every emotion you have has a thought with it. There's literally no such thing as being too into your head. And too into your heart, right? Because anytime you have a feeling, you will have thoughts. It's just that some of us are better at thinking than we are at feeling. And some of us are better knowers through feeling than through propositional knowledge. But they're integrated into the whole. Your body, your social aspect, all of those things are part of you in an inseparable way. You couldn't take your mind out of you, right? Your body is, maybe I'm getting too far afield here, but your body is the sort of thing that requires your soul to be in it. When you die, you don't leave a body behind. You leave a corpse behind. Or, particles arranged body-wise for the Peter Van Wagen fans. How is it that you evaluate your technology here? Well, it's going to be something really, really simple. And this is where things get underwhelming, I think. It's going to turn out that Jesus was right. It's going to turn out that Jesus had the answer to this all along. And although what's happening is a really big threat, we already have the solution to it. The issue is whether or not we're going to invest in it. If you want to know whether or not you should adopt this particular kind of technology, the question you need to ask is it going to help me? Is it more likely to help me or harm me becoming slower to anger? Is it going to help me to grow in justice, in love, in compassion? Or is it more likely to grow and habituate in me contempt or spite or anger? That's the question. I talk with a lot of churches right now and other parachurch ministries that want to adopt AI. And the reason, I always ask them, why? Why do you want to adopt AI? Well, because everyone else is doing it, and we got left behind with the internet age. And I think that wasn't our problem, getting left without websites. Our problem was that we didn't have anything to put in their place. We didn't have the ability to be persons with other persons. So I think that, and I might get in trouble again here, I think that if you look at the studies in sociology and you analyze them the way an economist does, and then think about them the way that an ethicist would, I think that what our culture is not fundamentally secular or anti-Christian or disenchanted. I don't think it's anywhere near that. What I think is it's radically depersonalized. Everything, they're all interwoven. But I think in terms of an explanatory theory, what's going to do best for us is to understand it as depersonalized, because now it's going to be really easy for us to see how guilty we are of that as well. And we are. We really are. So if you want to adopt a particular technology, how is it going to help you become like Jesus? And one of the arguments that I always hear is, well, it'll give you more time. And the response is, time is good only for those people who know how to use it well. And we often don't, because we'll just fill it with something else. Right? Now, the corrective for this isn't to abandon technology. I'm not saying that. The corrective for this is cleaving to Christ. It's learning to live in his way so that these sorts of gadgets lose their glimmer, right? They become like wonderful, things mediums that we can use to express and relate to other people, or we can just take them out altogether. I have a 0 technology policy in the classes, 0, because we know all the studies, sorry for the people that are typing, we know all the studies say that typing things out is not at all as effective in terms of not just your memory, but also your sharpening your cognitive capacities than writing by hand. Right? But we think that it's more efficient, right? So if you were to think, everyone's got a gospel. If you were to think about the gospel of technology, it's efficiency. What AI is so brilliant at doing is gathering more and more data and processing it faster. Its efficiency is dwindling, right? We've got this huge power problem now. Did you see this? I don't know if it came out 2 months ago, where ChatGPT, people using it when they'd say thank you, were just eating up tons of energy. When they'd say please or thank you, just those words eat up so much energy. It's very, very inefficient in terms of the hardware. But why think that efficiency at all is a virtue? Do you see it in Christ? Do you see it in the development of faith, hope, and love? Inefficiency, making mistakes, is often a catalyst for becoming more like Jesus. Right? So you think about the values that are put into AI, and again, I'm not saying that they're all bad. I don't think they're all bad. I use it for various things. Talk about what I think are some of the good ones if you want, but I'm just trying to overplay this because this side is not heard often. The AI, the values they get put into it, these issues of efficiency, are not the sort of things that are going to make us any more like Jesus, because Jesus was often radically inefficient. Radically, look, I'm hungry. Will you guys go take care of that? And I'm going to hang out here, right? And he gets to sit with someone, right? He's got friends that fall asleep on him. He's that boring. I don't think he was that boring. It's just we may have not had eyes and ears to see, just like you don't get my jokes. Yes, use that joke next time. Do you hear what I'm saying? I'll try to say it in a different way. What you've got here is this system that started so long ago on one story, and this is I think a more helpful way to understand the relationship between faith and science that I've only seen histories of technology work out, is the relationship between technology and the church being a more dominant factor than the scientists themselves. Because the technology was what drove where the scientists looked at things. And so the heavy plow, for example, is a pivot point in how it is that we related to creation. Because it was something that could be efficient, but could radically tear up, right, your land. Not saying that that's bad, but the shift in how you relate to creation frames things in a particular kind of way so that all becomes resources for efficiency. And now you're starting to lose an incarnational aspect of the world. And everything comes, what Heidegger called standing in reserve. It's just waiting for me to use it. And we treat each other that way often. It's ingrained in us. So I want to say, the being formed in Christ is the sort of thing that you have to be really attentive to, because spiritual formation is not a choice. You will be formed just by virtue of being in this world. It's going to happen. The technology is going to form you. It already has. It already has. The reason why the news was easy to sneak in certain sorts of outrageous sorts of things was because it became indistinguishable for entertainment when it started to become something that was in the television. And then even worse when it became something that was mediated through your phone. This entertainment thing now holds my work and my relationships, right? And so I can bring so much harm to the world just by doing this. Have you thought about the amount of power that you have right now? Do you think that we're like, so you could think about it this way, like the atomic bomb was a really bad situation, right? It could do a lot of damage, but there are only so many fingers that could press the button. But your smartphone can do radical damage too, and just about everyone that we are in fellowship with has that power, that capacity, right? Is that really a good thing? Or do you want to become the kind of person that could use that well, right? So you've got to go back to the person, I think. And now this is going to be hard, and this is, again, the boring part. But if it's not this answer, if Jesus' answer isn't, now go sit and be with each other in the awkwardness, where you don't know what to say, where you're ashamed, and looking another person in the eye is difficult because you've not asked them to forgive you, that's the real work. And if that sounds boring to us, we might ask, like, what sort of movie are we expecting our lives to be? Right? How spectacular should my life be? If Jesus' answer isn't the sort of thing that draws us back into being persons, then he doesn't have an answer to this problem. That's another way of putting it. Because you can't get facts about persons in the same way you can't get facts about consciousness from facts about things that are not persons. And now we're just going to do the heavy lifting of being reconciled to one another, to praying for each other. Or like my mentor Dallas would say, if you want to learn to love your enemies, then really spend time in church. That's the truth. And you might find that you're your own worst enemy in many ways there. And there's a long story to be told about that too with our technology. The way that it undermines our flourishing is very, very subversive. The latest studies on pornography addiction that have come out over the past 10 or 12 years are piling up more and more evidence that the primary motivating factor in pornography addiction is self-hate, self-contempt. I will use this to just further show me that I'm worth nothing. It's a big, big issue that's going on. And I could explain the experiments, but they have a really high, once they get this data on facts about your upbringing and what sort of ways that you relate to yourself in the world, they can predict with a very, very high specificity the very kind of pornography that you go for. The issue is very, very deep. It's not as simple as lust at the level of just, I want this gratification. It's much, much worse than that. It's I think I'm worth harming. Right? It's much more subversive than that. Much more subversive. But it's at the level of the person now. Right? So if the primary way that sin manifests itself in our lives is in our desire to control and manipulate the way that other people see us, and that's always how it is, well, now we got to look at our phones and see how it goes there, and how much of us have we signed off to it. I mean, who sleeps with their phone in their room? Show of hands. Show of hands. Why do we do that? So I need an alarm clock. No, you don't. We had alarm clocks before. They were just outside the phone. But how bad are they for your spiritual life? Pretty bad, right? We don't carry Bibles around anymore. No. We carry our phones around. That's not the same. It does not feel the same. It does not have the same gravity. It does not have the same sense of distraction. And it's so common sense. Why does that not seem exciting to us? These little things will pile up. And I think in many, many ways, the church is going to do and always does its best when it's very, very successful at becoming more like Jesus and making publicly available and testable knowledge about how to become like Jesus available to everybody there. So does your church have a 12-week program where they're going to try to figure out whether or not they can become slower to anger and then really test it, right? Or are we just going to sort of put something on our social media because I said the right thing there at this time, and I was really against this one thing over here at the right time.